white female, mid-50s, with red shoulder length hair, and my preferred pronouns are she and her. A little bit of housekeeping. I would like, if you have questions and answers, you can put them in the question and answer portion of the screen at the bottom. We want to save the chat for questions about technical difficulties, or if our panelists want to post a website or something there. So without further ado, let's get this started. And I'm first going to turn this over to Robin Jones to introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. My name is Robin Jones, and I am the director of the Great Lakes ADA Center. I'm a white female. I have short hair that many would say is violet in color. I am sitting in my office with an office background. Actually, there's some Halloween lights that are projected behind me, but otherwise it's a Halloween background. And I have a gray coat type thing draped over my shoulders, and I wear glasses. My preferred pronouns are she and her. So thank you.
Just a reminder for our other panelists, if you will please turn your camera off until it is your section is ready. Thank you.
Great. So just so I understand, and I believe, I'm sorry that I didn't get this clarified before, but we are sharing our own screens. Is that correct?
Yes, Robin, that is correct.
Okay, good. Thank you. I just want to make sure. All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen at this time. So the topic that I'm going to be talking about today is reasonable accommodation. And I'm doing it in the context of looking at some of the most commonly asked questions from employers. When you have kind of a short time period to do these things, it's best if you kind of do it in a practical. I could talk hours on just the issue of reasonable accommodation. So hopefully I've captured some of the main essence here as we start, and then we'll be hearing from our various panelists regarding the specifics of actually hiring and employing people with disabilities. So one of the most common questions is, how do I know who a person with a disability is under the ADA? So the ADA's definition of disability mirrors that which is found under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It was further clarified by some additional legislation known as the ADA Amendments Act in 2008. But we're talking about individuals who have a physical or psychological impairment that substantially limits them in one or more major life activities. This includes individuals also who have episodic conditions, abnormal cell growth, or limitations in their bodily functions. It also includes conditions that are not necessarily permanent. So what was one of the changes in the 2008 ADA Amendments Act is I don't have to prove I can't do anything. I don't have to prove that my disability is permanent. I just have to prove that I am substantially limited compared to the general population, and that the condition is such that it impacts, it's not a transient condition like a broken leg or something, because even a broken leg could develop into a ADA related disability if, for example, let's say somebody had problems or difficulties in the healing process. Most recently, what we have seen through some interpretation by the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services is they're recognizing long-haul COVID as a disability. Individuals who have lasting complications from having been positive for COVID. So that's just an example. Not necessarily a permanent disability. We don't have a lot of longevity in regards to this particular issue, but definitely is longer than will be expected for someone to typically recover from COVID and be asymptomatic or not have any residual issues. The ADA also covers persons who have a record of having an impairment in the past. So someone who had cancer previously, somebody who may have had a substance abuse issue previously, not currently active for them, but they may face discrimination based on that record of impairment. This group does not typically become eligible for reasonable accommodations because their impairment is not currently active. However, they're protected against discrimination based on that previous record. And then individuals who are regarded as having a disability. These are individuals with disabilities and without disabilities who entities regard as having a disability or being limited. So for example, making an assumption about somebody who might use a wheelchair not being able to do certain tasks or certain things without really knowing if that person is not able to do those things, that would be making an assumption or regarding them as have a disability, and they would have protections under the law. How do I have to hire somebody with a disability if they apply for a job? ADA is not an affirmative action statute. You may be subject to other affirmative action requirements, but the ADA itself is not an affirmative action requirement. You must and have a right to hire the most qualified individual for the position that you desire or have available. And you really don't need to make sure you're not disqualifying somebody with a disability solely because they will need an accommodation. We hear employers who will say, well, I'm not going to hire you. I've got two candidates. You're equally qualified, but one needs an accommodation and the other doesn't. That would be a discriminatory act to take if I'd made that decision based on one needing an accommodation and the other not needing an accommodation. Can I ask someone to tell me about their disability? What questions can I ask? Rule of thumb is do not focus on the disability or ask questions about it during the interview process or the application process at all. Focus your questions and inquiries on the job tasks and how the applicant would perform them. If someone does identify that they need an accommodation to do the job and you believe that the employee is qualified to do the job if the accommodation was provided, extend a conditional offer of employment and explore the accommodation during that next phase, which we would call the conditional offer of employment phase. If after exploring the accommodation, the cost, the impact on the organization, you can withdraw the offer of employment, but to do so, it must be based on information that the accommodation is not reasonable or that the accommodation, even with the accommodation, the individual is not qualified. So this phase allows you as the employer to explore that particular issue of accommodation for someone who you believe is qualified and provides the opportunity to ask additional questions and explore that accommodation further. Do I have to provide someone with everything that the employer applicant asks for? The rule of thumb is you're not required to provide anything that is not reasonable. So you're only required to provide accommodations that are reasonable. Accommodations must be effective. So it's not a matter of just saying, oh, here, I'll give you this widget or this gadget. You need to make sure that the accommodation that is being provided is effective. So it may require some exploration of different options because one may not fit as well as another. And I need to be able to explore those issues. You're not required to provide somebody with their preferred accommodation. You want to understand why that person has a preference, but you're not required to provide them with their preferred accommodation as long as it is an effective accommodation. So I might want to have the Cadillac and you're going to give me the Dodge Dart instead. As long as the Dodge Dart gets me to where I need to do and is effective for me, you've met your obligation, even though I may have preferred the Cadillac. You need to match the requested accommodation with the work-related limitation. You are not required to provide personal services or equipment. Those things are not required. Those are the responsibility of the individual. Sometimes personal equipment sometimes things may look like personal equipment when they actually are not. They are very specific to the job situation. So for example, I may use a common wheelchair in my everyday mobility, but on the job, I'm required to go out into maybe uneven surfaces or into dirt surfaces and stuff. And I may need special tires on my wheelchair in order to do that. It's not the employer's responsibility to provide me the wheelchair, but the employer may need to provide me as an accommodation some alternative tires to put onto my wheelchair to be used at work for that particular situation or environment that I have. Do I set precedents by providing an accommodation for an employee? No, a reasonable accommodation is a case basis. The fact that one person was provided X accommodation does not mean everybody who comes and asks for that accommodation is required to be provided it. The issue is with the reasonable accommodation, you look at it as a case-by-case situation. Every employee is going to be different. Every job is going to be different. And as well as your circumstances may be different. You may have been able to do something in January, but now we're in July and things have changed. Your bottom line has changed. Your jobs have changed, the responsibilities have changed or whatever. So what may have worked as an accommodation in January may no longer be relevant in July. This is why it's just really important that you look at accommodation as a case-by-case issue and not a blanket, this is what we do or what we don't do for anybody. It's really important that you establish procedures for requesting accommodations and that you establish a timely process for reviewing those requests for accommodations. This is where employers get into the most trouble, is not having procedures in place and also not being timely in the way that they review and look at requests for accommodations. It's also important to educate your employees so that they will know what your policies and procedures are and how to apply them. That's everything from the person with a disability understanding, but also those who are responsible for implementation, such as a supervisor or a manager. I'm afraid to hire somebody with a disability because they will most likely sue me at some point. How do I protect myself? Well, first and foremost, all employees are potential what ifs, and when it comes to litigation, anyone may file a complaint or not like the way you looked at them, the way you talked to them or whatever. So that's just the reality of working with people in human nature. If you follow your appropriate policies and procedures when you're considering a reasonable accommodation, make sure that you also document your efforts. So really it becomes about what did I do? And how do I document that? Because it's one of those things that's never a problem till it's a problem. Also, it's important to create a workplace environment that reinforces non-discrimination based on disability. Embrace disability as part of your overall diversity program in your organization. This is really important, and we've really seen, and the research has shown, that companies who have disability inclusive environments and look at diversity and include disability as diversity have far fewer issues in the workplace on this, because there's so many natural supports put in place that support individuals in the various processes for reasonable accommodation. Do I have to pay someone with a disability even if they took a 2-hour break? You're only required to pay someone for work that they have performed. Understanding that altering a work schedule, providing additional breaks, part-time schedules, or use of unpaid time are all forms of reasonable accommodation. They would be part of the review and the requesting process. If someone is only working 6 hours a day, even though they might be in the environment for 7 or 8 hours because they're taking additional time off because of their disability, then that is, you only would pay them for the time that they work. The accommodation may be the additional time for rest periods or things of that nature. Consider the use of benefits to address leave for disability-related issues such as FMLA, vacation or sick time, unpaid leave. The ADA recognizes leave as a reasonable accommodation and does not have all of the same requirements that FMLA does, such as having to work for a certain number of hours or a maximum number of days being available to you and such. ADA leave is also available the first day of employment. It's a different type of leave than FMLA. It's governed under the rules and regulations of reasonable accommodation under the ADA. What can I tell other employees when they ask me why someone got a special piece of equipment or is receiving time off? All medical information is confidential, whether it's an employee with a disability or an employee without a disability. You should inform your employees that you're complying with local, state, and federal laws. Do not share information about the person's disability. Do not share any information about even that it's an ADA accommodation. Just talk about it in the context of that you're complying with appropriate laws and regulations. Really important is to make sure that you have done disability awareness training and educate your employees about the reasonable accommodation process so everybody's on the same page. How do I pay for accommodations? Employers are responsible for the cost of accommodations. You're only required to provide accommodations that are reasonable. There may be an administrative or a financial hardship related to the accommodation, but most of the research that's been done around reasonable accommodation shows that the majority of accommodations are less than $100 to implement. Majority of accommodations that are requested from employees often deal with issues of change of policy, practice, and procedure more so than they do of purchasing of a piece of equipment or something of that nature or service. Of course, there are going to be some disabilities that are going to require accommodations that may cost money, such as sign language interpreters, real-time captionists, and things of that nature. But those, again, comes down to a case-by-case situation and a scenario where you would examine what's necessary and what's needed and look at what options might be available. So somebody may need a sign language interpreter for unit meetings because of the large number of people that are involved, but might be able to use other forms of communication. And the way technology is changing, there's more and more options available for communication for a one-on-one interaction that might occur. Consider the impact of tax credits and tax deductions. And this, I know you're going to talk a little bit later about some of the benefits and such with one of the other presenters, but there is an IRS code for architectural barrier removal, as well as disabled access credit that can be used for it by smaller employers available as well. So these are part of the defense that an employer would need to look at if they're going to make an argument of financial hardship. And last question is, how do I discipline somebody with a disability? Can I ever fire them? We get lots of questions about the fact that, you know, once I hire you, I'm never going to be able to fire you because you'll sue me or whatever else it might be. Again, it goes back to that litigation issue you can't necessarily control, but workers with disabilities are held to the same workplace standards of conduct and performance as coworkers without disabilities. One of the biggest mistakes we see for employers is they give employees with disabilities, quote unquote, leeway because they might feel bad for them, or they might feel guilty, or that, oh, you know, kind of a negative, poor person, poor pity kind of a situation on an individual. That's the worst thing that an employer can do. Employers and employees want to be treated the same as their coworkers, and they should be treated the same as their coworkers and held to the same production standards and performance standards. If somebody identifies a disability as the reason for their poor performance, then you should engage in the reasonable accommodation process to see if there's any accommodations that will allow that person to perform their job. Understanding that the defense, my disability made me do it, is not a defense under the law. And that concludes the comments that I have, are the most common questions. You can always contact our office at 800-949-4232. And we have an email address of adata@adagreatlakes.org. And we also have a website of www.adagreatlakes.org. So thank you very much. And I will turn it over to the next presenter.
Thank you, Robin, very much. I want to remind everyone, if you have questions for any of our panelists, please just put it in the question and answer section, and they will join together at the end of their presentations to answer your questions. All right, we're going to hand it over to Biswa right now. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to pull up my presentation here. Give me 1 minute, okay? All right, the presentation is up. I will begin the slideshow. Thank you again, Robin. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Biswa Phuyal. I'm a business services consultant with the Illinois Division of Rehabilitation Services. I'm a brown male in my 30s, and my preferred pronouns are he, him, his. I am bald and clean shaven today. I'm wearing a black shirt, and I'm in my home office with a closed white door and closet in the background. I first want to thank Shelley and Tara at the Statewide Independent Living Council of Illinois for putting together this webinar on an important topic of the benefits of fostering a disability inclusive workplace and the efforts of my co-panelists and other collaborators and partners here today and around the state in advancing disability employment in Illinois. I'm going to talk to you guys today briefly about VR services in Illinois, and more specifically, the role of our unit, the Workforce Development Unit, does in the state in partnering with employers that want to advance disability hiring in the state. Just a few notes, any numbers that I blurred out today pertaining to unemployment, unemployment, and employment numbers and other labor market studies were all prior to the current pandemic. And I'm going to refer to vocational rehabilitation as VR and rehabilitation services as DRS. So with that said, let's begin. So who are we? I'm going to be talking extensively about the vocational rehabilitation program. It is the lead agency in the state that provides services to individuals with disabilities. We work in partnership with people with disabilities and their families to assist them in making informed choices to achieve full community participation through employment, education, and independent living opportunities. We have two programs. We have a vocational rehabilitation program and a home service program. Because I'm going to be talking about the vocational rehabilitation program, I do want to let you guys know a little bit about the home service program. That program provides a wide range of services to individuals with the most significant disabilities. And it enables them to retain in their homes and live as independently as possible. Some of the services that we provide are personal assistance, homemaker services, home delivered meals, assistive equipment, environmental modification, and many others. So the Voc Rehab program is a federally mandated program in each state. 80% of the funding comes from the federal government and 20% of it comes from the state. And the mission is very simple. It's to assist individuals with disabilities in obtaining and maintaining competitive integrated employment. The buzzwords here are competitive and integrated. Competitive means it's employment or work that is performed on either a full or part-time basis in which individuals are compensated for their work, and the compensation must be paid at or above the set minimum wage. And integrated employment means it's jobs that are held by people with disabilities in a typical workplace setting where majority of the persons employed are not people with disabilities. So in context, for example, if an employer has 100 employees, 51 of them would need to be individuals without a disability for the work to be considered integrated. Some of the things that DRS values are inclusion, diversity, equal opportunity, and accessibility. And we preach our customers to learn valuable skills so they can find meaningful work and live productive lives. This doctrine is established so DRS customers can find that quality employment that pays them a living wage and offers them an opportunity for advancement. So what do we do? There is a lot that we do. What you see here in this slide is really the nuts and bolts. We have, I think, over 1,800 employees statewide. We provide employment services and counseling to people with disabilities. We refer them to as our customers. And we also provide or arrange for services to enable that individual to go to work. We also assist them with achieving their education goals and help them pay for their education costs at a community college or at a four-year university. And we also provide training and technical assistance to employers regarding disability employment issues. And this last bullet point is some of the stuff that our unit does. Here we kind of work with not just the job seekers and our field office staff, but we also work with our other customers, which are employers. Our job is to establish relationships with these businesses and employers so we can maximize opportunities for DRS job seekers. There are panelists here in this presentation that we've partnered with, and we like to meet employers to discuss the advantage of having a disability inclusive workplace for their workforce needs, and also what we can do differently to make sure that they are meeting their needs with the talented job seekers that we serve at the Illinois Division of Rehabilitation Services. So the presumption of the DRS job seeker, there's this big misconception and myth that only someone that uses a wheelchair or someone that has a significant intellectual disability is someone that receives DRS services, and that's just not the case. Here are the facts. Disability is in a very broad spectrum. these are the type of individuals that we service. Someone that is recovering from cancer, someone that's diabetic, those are all considered disabilities. Recently we've noticed in our society, that there's a prevalent with mental health disorders, and we service those individuals also. According to the 2010 census, I believe 1 in 5 Americans had a disability, and fortunately that number is increasing. So our services are very crucial, today people with disabilities are considered the largest minority group in America, and they are a diverse group of people with a wide range of needs. So two people with the same type of disability can be affected in very different ways, and a lot of disabilities are hidden and you can't see. So it's important that when we do go out there and we meet with employers, we let them know that we have we serve a broad range of individuals that have various needs, and it's not confined to just some misconceptions that some folks just might have. Our locations, we have 46 field offices throughout the state of Illinois, and they are divided into 5 regions, and we cover all of the 102 counties in the state. Currently, our field offices are closed, meaning we don't have appointments in the office. Some of our staff are working out of the office, but there's absolutely no interruption in any of our services. Anyone interested in receiving or just knowing more about VR services can call our hotline number, which is at the end of this presentation, or they can visit the DHS public page and navigate their way through the DRS page to just learn a little bit more about the services. And when you do call our field office to speak to a staff, you can talk to them about why you're calling and hear a little bit more about the services that DRS provides. Who do we serve? We serve job seekers with a disability. Those are our customers that have the barrier to employment. We serve educators. We serve community organizations, a lot of them who are here today, and employers and businesses. And that's the point that I made earlier, where our unit comes in, where we collaborate with field office staff to discuss employment opportunities for individuals with disability. And in that approach, we have this dual customer approach where we're serving the job seeker and we're also serving the employer. So and our goal is to make sure that each of their needs are being met, and we kind of serve as like the matchmaker and making sure that the job seeker that's looking for work finds the employment that they want, and the employer that's looking for the job seeker finds the job seeker. Who is eligible to receive VR services? Anyone with a disability who can benefit from our services is eligible to receive VR services. The disability has to be documented. It has to be a physical or mental impairment that constitutes or results in a substantial impediment to employment. Oftentimes, these are recipients of SSDI or SSI. They do have to be over the age of 16 and have to be authorized to work in the United States. And the process begins really by first completing a referral. That can be done online, can be done over the phone, it can be done walking into an office, it can be done by the individual themselves. It can be done by a family member, an advocate, and guardian, someone within our network. Once the referral is completed, they'll be called to complete an initial interview where they're going to meet with the VR counselor, to discuss, what their goals are. The VR counselor does have to verify that the individual does have a disability and they can benefit from VR services. And once that initial questionnaire is completed, the VR counselor and the customer will work on what's called the IPE, which is the Individual Plan for Employment. I'm not going to go into great details of the IEP, but what it consists of is tools to help prepare the job seeker to get the job that they want. Some of the topics that are included in the IPE are job readiness, job search, job placement, job coaching, and job retention. So why are we here? Why am I part of this presentation? What is our unit doing with the Division of Rehabilitation Services? The Workforce Development Unit has been in place for about 2 years now. And the reason why we're part of DRS and why we're supporting our field office staff is because we want businesses to think differently about their current or previous hiring practices and tap into the talented pool of DRS job seekers to fulfill their workforce needs. I don't know the exact number, but I know there are over 10 to 15,000 job seekers in Illinois that receive DRS services, and we want businesses to tap into these talented individuals. And we're giving employers access to an untapped or even underutilized market of job seekers that are ready to work, and they can get the job done, and most importantly, ensure that they're understanding the benefit of hiring people with disabilities. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2020, this was again right before the pandemic, people without a disability's unemployment rate was 3.7, and people with a disability was 8.5. What we want employers to know and businesses to know, or the general society to know, is that there are benefits to hiring people with disabilities. And we think that there's room for improvement, and collaborating with the employers and businesses to ensure that we can change that number. There have been positive trends. There are companies that are adopting the model of hiring individuals with disabilities. Some you'll hear from our panelists here today, there's been positive signs and trends, but I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And that's when that's where our unit kind of comes in to have these conversations with employers, and also work collaboratively with our community partners who have the same mission to make sure that we get this job done. What we're seeing is that the tight labor market, at least prior to the pandemic and even now, is pushing companies to opening their eyes and hiring people with disabilities. And what we want to convey to them is that people with disabilities are loyal, they're enthusiastic, and more importantly, they're able to get the job done as well as anyone, sometimes even better than the general population, which I'll discuss a little bit more later. There have also been studies conducted that prove that hiring individuals with disabilities helps businesses and their bottom line. And I think Robin alluded to that earlier. Based on a financial performance of 140 Fortune 500 companies that participated in a study called the Disability Equality Index, research showed that hiring people with disabilities is good for business. It yields higher revenues, it yields higher net income and profit margins, and it just wasn't the productivity or the numbers. These companies also reported an increase in morale, and there was a better public perception and a favorable outlook of their company. So based on the study and the testimonials that you'll hear today later on from our employer partners, you will know that there are benefits to hiring people with disabilities. So our unit, I do want to discuss a little bit about what our unit is doing to kind of correlate with some of the talking points that I just discussed, and also increase those numbers and improve on some of the statistics that I mentioned earlier, is to help employers diversify their workforce needs. We provide solutions for their workforce needs of business customers while we prepare talented, qualified job seekers with disabilities for their choosing careers. We want to assist the business community in discovering talented individuals from DRS, and we want them to focus not on the disability, but on their ability. And we're kind of like the intermediary or the bridge between the business community and the DRS job seekers that receive services from our field offices. And we do that by facilitating an establishment and maintenance of a working relationship with the business community to continually generate solutions for area business needs. We work with businesses to expand competitive employment opportunities for people with disabilities, and then we consult and provide support to the field office staff regarding labor market trends, industry sector needs, and business expectations and employment opportunities. So, we provide all the relevant information that our field office staff will need and the DRS job seeker will need, so they're not missing out on anything. We also take a lot of their questions. Oftentimes when we meet with employers, we ask field office staff and counselors and supervisors to attend the meetings with us so they can ask those important questions to the employers, and also give them insight on on the benefits of hiring people with disabilities to expand their workforce. So some of the benefits for the employers, then a lot of this has been proven by doing studies and research, is it's a cost-effective solution to address the business needs. It improves customer satisfaction results. It reduces the recruitment and training costs associated with routinely filling high turnover ratios. There's lower absenteeism and sick leave than other employees. It promotes a more diverse and inclusive workplace and enhances an employee's morale. And it fosters a culture of corporate responsibility. And there are also financial incentives available when employers embrace hiring people with disabilities. The benefits for the job seekers. It increases opportunities for competitive and integrated work experience. They have access to accurate and timely labor market information for use in career decision-making and planning. There's income, that supports themselves and their family, and they also see increase in self-esteem and self-worth. And the way we do this, the way we collaborate with the business community and with the workforce partner community is, it's just frequent collaboration. It's just making sure that we're part of the table, we're part of the conversation, we're constantly engaging with employers and also workforce partners and strategizing and thinking of new ideas to help them expand their workforce, and all that, which includes bringing in a disability-friendly workforce. We also participate in a lot of business networking events. We also contact specific businesses to share information about VR services and programs. We participate and host in business job fairs and hiring events. And we maintain contact with businesses by being available for them, if they have any questions, and provide ongoing technical assistance. Here are some of the services that DRS provides. The first one is employment, which I obviously went into depth during this presentation. That includes recruitment, retention, and employment advisory services. We also provide services relating to accommodations. We have a team in Springfield that provides worksite assessments and accommodations to employers that have people with disabilities in their workforce. We also provide disability awareness training. We also have a unit that can offer advice on any disability compliance questions that an employer might have relating to ADA and employment laws and EEO. There are financial incentives also. We work with our partners in IDES to ensure that the employers that we are partnering with are accessing work opportunity tax credit. And there's also on-the-job training that DRS provides to employers. And these are just some of the nuts and bolts of the services that we provide. There are many more, because we are such a large state agency and we have so many folks that are experts in this. If anyone has any questions, they can consult with us anytime, and we'll make sure that if we can't get them the resource that they need, we affirm to anyone in the community or any of our partners to give them that resource so they're better equipped to have a disability-friendly workforce. Here are some resources that I just wanted to share with the group, and you'll be getting a handout of this. The first one is our public page, where you can read some success stories of DRS customers sharing their experience with DRS and how working with DRS helped them find the job and careers of their choice. You can also navigate our public page by learning a little bit more about DRS services and also completing that self-referral form that I mentioned earlier. The second one is an all-encompassing site that provides job seekers with disabilities and employers that want to hire those job seekers with tools and resources centered around disability employment and accommodations. And the last one is a job board, Tapability, for employers to post to recruit disability talent. It works like Indeed or Career Builder. However, the positions that are posted on this site, a lot of them by Fortune 500 companies, are posted specifically to hire individuals with disabilities. And our customers that we service do have access to this, and it kind of gives them an edge, to access those opportunities with those employers that want to hire people with disabilities. Here is my contact information. I'm sure that you guys will be getting this presentation. I'm going to drop it in the chat box also. I do want to make a note that if there are employers here that want to connect with us and talk to us a little bit more about hiring people with disabilities, and have that conversation about expanding their workforce and work with us to tap into the talented individuals that we service, please feel free to contact us, and we can kind of get that conversation going and bridge some sort of partnership so we can help you guys with your workforce needs. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the presentation from our partners at Rush University Medical Center and the Bazaar, the two employers that we've worked with extensively. Now I'm going to hand it off to Kevin Irvine, the Senior Talent Consultant for individuals with disabilities at Rush University Medical Center. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Biz. Great to be here. Appreciate all your presentation as well as Robin's presentation. My name is Kevin Irvine, and I am the, I'm going to put my PowerPoint slide up. One sec. I am the Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant for individuals with disabilities at Rush University Medical Center here in Chicago. And joining me shortly is going to be my colleague, Sophie Seypura. I'll let her introduce herself. She's a clinical research assistant at Rush. Rush is, if you're not familiar with our academic medical center on the near west side of Chicago. My physical description, I am a 52-year-old cisgendered man with dark blonde hair, reading glasses, and a button-down shirt. And I'm sitting against a dark gray background. My pronouns are he, him, and I also am a person with disabilities. I was born with a bleeding disorder called hemophilia, and I have lived with hemophilia my whole life, and I also have HIV, and I've had HIV for almost 40 years. So my disabilities most of the time are non-apparent, which is the case with most of us with disabilities. I also want to show you what our careers page looks like. I'm going to go there. So Rush University Medical Center has a long career, a long history of disability inclusion and accessibility. One of the roles I have at Rush is co-chair of Rush's ADA Task Force Committee, which was established back in 1991, the year after the ADA was passed, to work on accessibility and accommodations throughout Rush. That work included hiring people with disabilities, promoting accessibility, and working on making Rush a great place for people with disabilities to visit, get services, and work. And that commitment led to Rush's creation of my position 3 years ago. So I started at Rush back in 2018. The position I'm in is in the recruitment team, and it's specifically to recruit people with all types of disabilities for jobs at Rush. Now, we don't have jobs set aside for people with disabilities. It's really about letting people with all types of disabilities know about all the different positions we have and providing extra support to people when they're looking for jobs at Rush. As part of that, we do outreach to organizations like Division of Rehab Services and folks like Biz, who you just heard from. Also, organizations that support people who are looking for work, whether they're people with disabilities or not. We also recruit veterans, people who live on the west side of Chicago, and other communities to make sure that we have a diverse workforce. Now, when you go to our careers page, one of the things you're going to see, if you scroll down, after looking, you can find access to our jobs, is a culture of inclusion. And when you go to the culture of inclusion page on our website, you're going to learn more about how diversity makes Rush a great place to work. Right here, you're going to see portals to get to our veterans page and our people with disabilities page. And when you go to our people with disabilities page, first thing you're going to see is the face of Sarah Innocenti, who is a nurse at Rush with type 1 diabetes. Now, when I got to Rush back in 2018, Rush had a great history of accessibility and disability inclusion. But as I have invisible disabilities, like most people do, I wanted to know, so where are all the people with disabilities at Rush? And when we're doing outreach to people looking for work, considering working at Rush, we want to make sure people feel comfortable self-identifying as having a disability, whether they need an accommodation or not. We comply with Section 504 of the Rehab Act. So we do ask everyone applying for jobs at Rush, or give them an opportunity to confidentially self-identify as having a disability. And that's really important for us because we need to know how are we doing in recruiting and hiring people with disabilities. And because most people don't self-identify with disabilities, and most people don't have disabilities that are apparent. The only way we're going to know about how we're doing in recruiting and hiring people with disabilities is if people take the chance to self-identify confidentially when they're applying. But you know, I know it takes a lot of courage sometimes, or there's a lot of fear around self-identifying when you're applying for a job if you don't need to ask for an accommodation, or if your disability is not obvious. And so when I got to Rush, and I'm both looking at recruiting people and making them comfortable applying for jobs and self-identifying, but also talking to hiring managers about recruiting people with disabilities, I want to let them know that people with disabilities aren't just some exotic species out there in the wild. I want them to know there's people with disabilities all around us working at Rush right now. So we started reaching out to, as I found people with invisible disabilities at Rush, asking them if they'd be willing to have their photos taken. And so we could put them on our careers page to show the face of disability inclusion at Rush. And so when we go to our disabilities page, you're going to see pictures of actual Rush employees with disabilities, and it has their name, their job at Rush, and then what their disability actually is. So I'm just going to read through a couple of these real quick just to show you. This is Parul Aurora, who's a registered nurse with low vision. This is Wendy Peoples, who's a collector for their physician revenue cycle team. And she's got a skin disorder called hidradenitis suppurativa, and I had not heard of it either until she shared that. Tiffany Arzuaga is a guest relations associate at Rush, and she's got a neuromuscular disease. Carlos Olvera is the manager and creator of Rush's Interpreter Services program, and he co-chairs Rush's ADA task force with me, and also has rheumatoid arthritis. And actually, he just developed hearing loss as well, so he's added another disability. So we actually need to update this page. There's my picture and my title. Sergio Alfaro is an EPIC technical trainer with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. And there's Sarah Innocenti, a registered nurse with type 1 diabetes.
Kevin, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
people are not seeing anything on your website. The only thing we're seeing on our screen is your PowerPoint.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you for letting me know that. I did not realize I was not sharing the screen. I sincerely apologize. I thought I was shifting. I am not an expert in this.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. So this is our website. I'm not going to review everything I showed you that I just talked about, but go to our page. You'll see all these people and pictures of Rush employees with a wide variety of disabilities, and sharing what they do at Rush, what their role is. Another thing you can see is a video of Rush employees talking about our disabilities employee resource group, which we launched in early 2019. That's a group that meets every other month, and it's a place for people that where people who care about disability inclusion at Rush can get together, share ideas and resources that make Rush an even better place to work. So the Disabilities Employee Resource Group has been really successful. We've had a lot of engagement and have over 100 people that are get our emails about our meetings and activities. And one of the things that has been great about our Disabilities Employee Resource Group is that when things have come up, we can turn to that group and get ideas. When the pandemic hit, masking made it really difficult for some employees with hearing loss to connect and communicate with other employees. And so Sophie's going to talk a little bit more about that, but we purchased transparent masks, and that came about as a result of Rush employees with hearing loss sharing their experience and asking for clear masks that would facilitate communication. And ultimately that made Rush a more accessible place for both employees, for audiologists working with patients with hearing loss, for visitors and patients with hearing loss. And they even improved education at our day school, the Lawrence Armour Day School, when they found when the teachers there started wearing clear masks that it improved communication for everybody. The last thing I want to say before turning this over to Sophie is that when I first started working at Rush, the percentage of people who self-identify with a disability when they're applying for jobs at Rush was around 3%. Over the course of the last couple of years, as we've been sharing more information about disability inclusion and kind of showing the face of people with disabilities at Rush, the numbers climbed up to 4.5 to 5%. And in the last fiscal year, which ended June 30th of this past year, we hired 86 individuals who self-identify with disabilities. Now, I'm sure there were more people with disabilities who we hired who didn't self-identify, but one of the reasons that we encourage people to be comfortable self-identifying and try and create a culture and a climate where people can be comfortable self-identifying with disabilities is that if they ever do need an accommodation for their disability, it's a much easier hurdle to ask for the accommodation if you're already out there and people already know that you have a disability. So I'm going to turn it over to Sophie and let her talk about her experience at Rush. And I will be available, both of us will be available for training questions later on today. And thank you very much. And take it away, Sophie.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. It is so good to be here. Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sophie Seypura. I'm a clinical research assistant at Rush University Medical Center. And my physical description is that I'm a white female with dark brown hair in my 20s. I'm wearing black. I am sitting against a white background. And just a little bit about myself. I'm profoundly deaf. I've been deaf since birth. I do wear one cochlear implant, and growing up in an oral family, I always wore my hearing devices, but I still heavily relied on reading lips. So to shape those sounds and the sounds that my devices picked up, to be able to shape those sounds into words. So I was lucky enough to have been raised by a very supportive and inclusive family, but in the outside world, knowing how to advocate for myself was key, because my disability is such an invisible one, as Kevin also had previously referred to it as. There are so many disabilities out there that are considered invisible disabilities, and can be very often very easily misunderstood. And that's been the case for myself as well. In my case, this is usually because while I do use American Sign Language in some environments, my primary communication is oral speech and lip reading. And because my hair usually covers my hearing devices, others would forget that I'm not just a little hard of hearing. And it wasn't just a matter of others around me speaking up or speaking louder or amplifying noise. It was because I have a very different communication need and that I need to see people's lips. So when I began my job at Rush, it was actually right around the time of the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I was initially really deeply worried about how I would be able to continue working in any healthcare environment, which I loved, because of the fact that those same masks, which became incredibly important to wear all times in the hospital, they posed a huge, distressing challenge for me because it was a literal barrier to how I communicated. But the accommodations department at Rush, since the beginning, immediately recognized these sorts of needs for workplace accommodation. So even when I first arrived for my new hire orientation, it was called, I was shocked and honestly so moved to see that Rush, specifically Kevin here, had already taken the initiative of setting up live closed captioning for me. Something that I had already planned on requesting, but didn't feel, I didn't expect to be able to feel that weight taken off by having that already done for me. And so I can't express enough the relief and gratitude that I felt for my workplace in these efforts, because it didn't end there. Through Kevin, I was also introduced to the Rush Employee Disability Resource Group, or DIRG as we call it, where our employee members were able to not only exchange helpful advice and guidance and everything from workplace accommodations to just sharing stories. But there were many friendships that were found as well, because there were so many employees in that group who were able to relate and understand certain challenges that many other people were not able to. So through that group, I actually joined forces with another DIRG member with hearing loss, as well as one of our on-site audiologists, as Kevin mentioned, to launch an effort to bring clear masks to Rush, which at the time were the only clear masks during the pandemic that were FDA approved for use in hospital environments. And Rush followed through with this, making them making them an option in not just my research department, but in so many other departments as well, as Kevin also mentioned. So in addition to having this clear mask available, I've also been able to request other accommodations, such as having closed captioning telephones for my workplace calls, as well as having the option of being able to make calls in private separate rooms where I was less likely to have background noises interfering with my calls and with the audio devices that I have to use specifically for my cochlear implant. So my time at Rush has been incredibly positive, especially during a time when communicating with others through mask would have otherwise just been absolutely impossible for me. But it's because of my workplace's emphasis on inclusivity and their ability to recognize the importance of workplace accommodations, it's through that I've been able to comfortably be able to advocate for myself and thrive and truly perform my job at the best I can. So with that, I believe I am now handing this off to Garret.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am going to get my screen up. As you can see, I have Walter, one of our employees. He's going to be joining us as well. You're going to hear from him a little bit soon, and Rob as well. And before I get up, let me get my screen up. I do want to communicate that I am a white male in his 30s. I do have brown hair, but I have a man bun as well, but it looks a little bit disheveled. I'm in the conference room of our business, and we have, as you can see, our core values are lined up against the wall. And in today's presentation, we're going to talk about our inclusion effort here at the Bazaar Inc. And my title is the Director of Employee Experience and Engagement, pretty much HR on steroids, and to help people, all of our employees feel more comfortable and feel like they are part of our family. And as you can see here, you see this title slide. It says 32% of our workforce. That's something that our CEO, Bradley Nardick, is pushing, and 32% of our current workforce is people from diverse backgrounds. He's practicing his speech. Rob, one of our other people practicing his speech. Okay, sorry about that. So what does that mean? We hire people, second chance, people with disabilities, people who've experienced homelessness, and vets. But the majority of this 32% is people with disabilities, and we're going to get into a little bit about how we develop this process. We are a family-run business here in River Grove, Illinois. Altogether, about have 131 employees, and we have a small retail sector called Bargains in a Box. 2 stores in Chicago, 1 in Villa Park, and 1 right by our home headquarters in River Grove. So let's get started. So a little bit about more or less kind of who we are. I think it really starts by, our core values. And our first core value is people first. Why is this important? I think when you talk about inclusion work or anything around, disability employment or anything like that, you got to make sure that this is kind of at the helm of what you're trying to change or your values as a company. And by people first, what that means is that everyone who walks in the door, they are socialized into our workplace the same way. And what we're trying to communicate is that everyone is welcome here if they want to work. And what I mean by if they want to work is, it doesn't matter what kind of background you come from. What we're looking for is the major work behaviors that are needed for that job. Rob, how you doing, man? I have a seat for you over here. Thank you. You're good. Trash can's right there, sir. Yep, right there. Yep. Open the top. Yep. There we go. Good work. Here's a seat, my man. So when we talk about the Bazaar, we're celebrating an inclusive workforce, and people first is our core value. It starts with our vision, our values. And today's agenda, I'm going to talk about, trusting the process, talking about our numbers from an HR perspective, and then hearing from our employees. I think they are the ones who are doing the work day in and day out, and they hold the weight and the change that we're trying to commit here. So I'm excited for you to hear from them as well. So when we talk about our, when we talk about our internal process, the biggest thing that we modified was we modified a couple of things. As a small company, there's not as many hurdles as something that you might say when we're trying to make change in our company. It's something that in some instances isn't as difficult because we only have so many employees, right? And the first thing that we did was, we modified our ATS, which is our applicant tracking system. What that means is we went to a more electronic process with Paylocity. And what that did was we also refined this process by creating a referral process where we worked with community partners. And I'll get into that. And Biz with the state is an amazing community partner. And actually some of these people on the call work with nonprofits that we actually work alongside with. But what we also did was we also embedded the WOTC tax credit form, which is a this is something that's filled out by people, credit from a company perspective. Something we made this change about a year ago, which was a working interview process where any new employee who comes into interview, they actually do a working interview where they actually do the thing. And don't show up. And an inclusion program, understand your SOP. And by that is and what's going in and how really different. And that's the crazy. Goal, right? As the sensitivity trade, I think it's just fears and concerns out. What are your fears? Process. We the community partner list, and what this is each week, things within profits in the area that help people with disabilities to help us staff. Actually, a very from us giving donations, services, college back is like, and now it is, let's right. A while back, Rob. What you can see here is the statistics of now, and you're going to see our turnover rates. Our growth all the employees that work at the Bazaar and Bargains in the Box is 7 years. Now, what I did was, I looked at our turnover rate for our disability and diverse workforce, and that's actually cut in half. So over that tenure, we only lost 4, 5, 6, 8 individuals. And of that, our turnover rate is 25%. Our growth rate is a positive 32%, and our average tenure rate is 1.3 years. You're going to be hearing from Rob, who's been here longer than 2 years, and then also Walt, who's been here for about 7 months, 6 months, 9 months. Gosh, time flies. I think it's just awesome to see is that, this is better business. I know we keep seeing it, we keep hearing it, but I'm gonna tell you right now, we're actually living it. And the morale and the culture, since I've been here this past year, it's completely shifted. And I think it's how we're able to get amazing talent, but also create this sense of community within not just our doors, but also in the surrounding area as well. As you can see, these are the termination reasons for our diverse workforce. Quit to move, discharge from job performance was only 1. And so forth. So it's not like it's something where people can't complete the job. It's just not the right fit, or something changed and so forth. So they moved to a different job. Overall, we received over $2,400,000 and $24,000, excuse me, in tax credits. It's been an amazing experience. It's something that started with Brad Nardick about 4 to 5 years ago. We used a consulting company out in New York called understood.org. And they brought me in about a year ago to kind of help kind of streamline this and kind of head this program on top of our HR department. And now it's taken kind of wings on its own and it's really grown. And I think you probably want to, not hear from me, but hear from our employees. So what I want to do is I want to first introduce you to, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay.
So it's all you.
My name is Robert Downey. I've been working at Bazaar for 2 years. My previous jobs were at a grocery store known as Jewel Osco and then Fresh Time.
Yep. And I guess my question for you, Rob, is why do you like working here? Or do you like working here?
I love working here because it was the best opportunity for a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned more things like shipping the orders and packing the orders.
Yeah.
I find out if we find out which is damaged, we don't send that one.
Yeah.
We don't ship
We
it.
don't ship it. Yeah. We send it to the stores, right?
Yeah, we send it to
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. Thanks. How has having a job at Bazaar changed your life, or has it changed your life?
It has changed my life because the coworkers here inspire me more.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel more confident.
Yeah. So they make you, how they make you feel? They make you feel confident?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I became so confident without
Yeah.
probably if it wasn't for my coworkers, I wouldn't be that confident.
Yeah. You are really confident. What do you find most challenging at your work?
Most challenging?
Yeah. What do you?
When there's a lot of orders to do.
Yeah.
It's probably going to take like a week or more to do. That's going to be more challenging.
Yeah, no, I got you, especially for Amazon. Yeah. How does Bazaar support you and help you do your job well?
It gave me opportunity to work there.
Yeah.
And it helps me grow much more.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable asking for help?
I used to be not so comfortable asking for help until I worked here.
Yeah.
And somebody inspired me to ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now you're more confident, right?
I got the confidence increased.
Yeah. Why do you enjoy coming to work every day? Now that you're full-time employee, 40 hours a week. Why do you enjoy coming to work?
Why I enjoy coming to work is I just want to get the work done.
Yeah.
And focus on the new project.
Yeah. You do a really good job too. 2 years, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Awesome. Do you have anything else that you want to tell the people on this call? You don't have to.
I just want to inspire people. I wanted to recommend somebody to work there. Kind of do want to do that.
Cool. Hey, you did a great job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Okay. Do you want to head back?
I gotta head.
Check your time. What's your time say? You have 3 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
You wanna walk back?
That's just
You want to grab your stuff from my office?
my stuff.
Do you have anything from my office?
I don't think I have anything in my
In-
your office.
Okay.
I don't know if you do.
Okay. Well, I'll come bring it to you. Okay. Thank you, Rob. It's all you.
Good afternoon. My name is Walter Johnson, and I think I'm gonna start off basically with, I understand we're talking about diversity and inclusion, but hearing Rob speak, it brought something to my mind that this company does that a lot of people don't see. Being disabled, I'm currently in a wheelchair, and I don't consider it being disabled because you kind of move around the same as everybody else. You just have to figure out different ways to do it. Me coming to this company wasn't something that I had to do, but it's something that I wanted to do. And once I got here, the whole diversity inclusion process had started, and a second chance and things of that nature. But coming here initially, I just wanted to see the process. I'm in a wheelchair. How would they react to it? How did it feel to be working in a warehouse environment, where I started at, and I'm currently not there now? And how would the company gravitate towards me being in a wheelchair? I hear us all talking about different preparations were made and for accommodation wise, but mentally, I didn't hear it since I came on the call. How does a company mentally prepare you to work there? Meaning, even though when I got here, they didn't have a handicap bathroom, they changed it within a day or so to prepare for me coming. Also, the workstation wasn't accessible. They created an environment where the workstation was accessible and safe, but mentally, they also helped. And what I mean by that, they didn't put me in position to fail. So if I give you a job and the position you put me in is just based off numbers I'm trying to get, then that's a position that you surely put somebody with a disability in to fail. I can't really do the job, but I'm trying to hire based off of numbers so I can complete something on my end to say, hey, I did it. That's not what this company is about. It actually starts at the top with Brad, who believes that this is the way to go. And that's what brought me in. Because if it didn't come from the top and I didn't feel the same type of togetherness or closeness or we care type of attitude, I wouldn't even be here. As far as in the workplace and dealing with different situations, they made it comfortable. They've also went above and beyond to make sure that every time that we have a meeting or a conversation about the workplace or something, what can we do to make it better? And once you give them what they can do to make it better, they strive towards getting it done. My position here is the office assistant, and I also help Garret with the human resource department as well. And I work with a lot of different community partners. And I also get to talk to different people who come from a background such as second chance or disabled. And that's actually the best part of my day, not just the work, but being able to talk to those people to give them confidence to know that there is a place that you can come work. I've been in a wheelchair since '92. Initially, I didn't know how to deal with it, but over time, maybe 2 years into it, I understood that, hey, this is nothing. This is just another hurdle in life that I can get over. And I've been self-employed since '92. I'm not going to get too far off into my business, but I'm not here for the money. I'm here because I believe in what they're doing. I'm here because I was drawn by Garret initially speaking to him, and I noticed a culture change. And I'm also here to inspire people that don't have the opportunity based off of a certain racism, that's what I would call it, of being disabled. And saying that you can't when I know that you can. This environment here only speaks one way. I know that you can. And when you're surrounded by a group of people or a company that says, I know that you can, the disabled part of things is out the window. You don't consider that. We're just people now. We're not putting you in positions to lose. We're putting you in position to win. So to sum everything up, I really believe in the Bazaar and the direction they're going, the people they're hiring, and the overall the overall family environment that you create. And I don't know if you can see all these different rules in our, what do we call it?
It's our core values.
In our core values.
We live them every day.
Each and every one, I can attest, is being followed to the T. So I hope you've enjoyed our presentation, and I'll give you back to Garret. Thank you.
Wow. Well, I don't know if I can top that. Seriously, you're gonna bring freaking tears to my eyes because I'm an emotional butterfly. But I just want to thank everyone, and I know Shelly, we have questions now, so I want to stop sharing my screen and mute myself and go back to you. Thank you all for coming to today's webinar.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you for your presentations. Okay, this is the time that we're going to go over to the question answer box and start answering some of these questions. Full disclosure, my internet connection went down, so I lost all of the questions except for the very last one. So I'll start with the one that I have. Garret and Walter mentioned a second chance. What does that mean?
People who formerly been like incarcerated.
Okay, great. Any of you other panelists have the question and answers that you can access that I lost?
Yeah, Shelley, there's a question from, I believe, Jean. And this might, well, this is actually directed to VR. For DVR services, there has to be SSI or SSDI in place. Not necessarily, Jean. You do not need to be a recipient of SSI or SSDI to receive our services. The only qualification really as far as disability is it has to be a documented disability from a medical provider, and that documented disability may impede in the individual finding or retaining employment.
There's a couple of questions related to my content. I'll go ahead and take those. One of them is, does a person fall under ADA? I'm sorry, this is Robin Jones speaking. Does a person fall under ADA protections while they have a broken, I think they meant leg or limb? Condition is temporary, but while they are healing, can they be considered disabled? The rule of thumb and the clarification provided in the 2008 ADA Amendments Act says no conditions that are transitory or that are an expected outcome of recovery, such as a broken limb or a flu or something of that nature would not be covered. However, again, if that person's course of recovery takes any direction other than what would be quote unquote typically expected. So for example, oftentimes with a broken limb, depends on the person, they could have difficulty with healing. They could have complications from a cast or other kinds of things and such that would change that trajectory. So that issue of they could be covered. We also really strongly encourage employers to look at what they can do to accommodate employees with temporary disabilities, not necessarily under the auspices maybe of the ADA and by classifying them as quote unquote disabled, but they still are a valued employee, and with minimal workplace modifications, which are not just only an ADA legal term and such like that, the individual could continue to work, and would not be necessarily a hardship on the employer to do that. So, for example, someone with a broken leg who may, need to elevate their leg in the office and need a little bit additional space, or need a little bit more time to get from point A to point B, and such because of walking on crutches or something like that, definitely is something that an employer, we would strongly encourage employer to look at doing. They would not be required, as with any situation, even with a person with disability, of transporting the person to and from work or any of those particular issues. But that person may need maybe a reassignment temporarily of parking because they need a closer parking space or something of that nature. Many municipalities offer temporary parking permits for people who do have broken legs and other kinds of things. So you would need to also honor those types of things such as that. So the second question that related to my discussion was, what is the policy or procedure for having a TTY for a local one-stop center? This is a very interesting question, an interesting issue. We get this a lot now. The ADA standards for architecture, as well as the regulations under Title II and Title III of the ADA, were last updated in 2010, becoming effective in 2012. At that time, there was a great deal of discussion about TTYs and potentially removing the TTY from the regulations because of the technology being, and some would say, outmoded, older and things of that nature, but it still exists within the regulations and such. So at this point, if you're an entity that does primarily conversation and services via the telephone, then you would still need to look at potentially a TTY. But we would really also encourage you to know who your customer base is and understand from your customers and your community what the best way for them to contact you is, and look at other alternatives like a text number, like a video phone, or other kinds of technology. I can tell you the U.S. Access Board is going to be engaging in a review and a redo of the accessibility standards in the next couple of years, as is Department of Justice reviewing their regulations in the next couple of years. We know that they are going to make some changes in this area, but right now, legally, it is there. Also, let me just clarify, again, having a TTY in-house is only required when you have communication that is complex and requires that type of, doesn't lend itself to relay services or some other alternative, and or if you provide telephone access to your customers. So if you have a public telephone available for your customers without disabilities to use, and many one-stops do that to allow people to be able to make calls to an employer or follow up on something with an employer, you would need to then make sure that you had that same access for people with disabilities. If you don't do that kind of work, then there is nothing in the ADA that says you have to have a TTY. You just have to have a way for people to contact you in an effective manner, such as publishing the relay number and things of that nature. So it really is a complex question. And I know that you're probably also speaking to the regulations specific to one-stop centers, and the current regulations for one-stop centers do require a TTY still under WIOA. So that's it for mine.
Thank you, Robin. I think Biswa, you have a couple of questions there you could answer too.
Yes, ma'am. So this is Biswa again with the Division of Rehabilitation Services. There's a question from Julie Jensen. Does an applicant need to disclose a disability if they are receiving services from a DRS-approved agency, for example, a post-secondary program? I think this question might be geared towards the applicant disclosing the disability when they're interviewing for a position or looking for a job. According to the ADA, the individual does not need to disclose a disability while they're looking for a job, while they're interviewing, or when they're on the job, unless they need some sort of reasonable accommodations. So that's according to the ADA law. However, when we work with employers and when our community partners work with employers, there's an understanding that the referrals and the applicants that we're sharing with them do have a disability. And a lot of that is kind of centered around increasing their inclusive and diversity hiring, and also just kind of embracing that culture of building a workforce that is reliant on individuals with disabilities. But generally speaking, you do not need to disclose that information to an employer if you're looking for work.
Okay, there's another question. Are there job protection accommodations for individuals who are independent contractors rather than full-time employees, 1099s versus W-2s?
I'll go ahead and take this question. It's one we get quite a bit. There's been some case law that's developed around this particular issue. The whole issue is the definition of who's an employer. And even if you have a contractor, if you are controlling the work of that individual, if you have a control over the work outcomes, the hours, the conditions of the work and things of that nature, then regardless of whether that person is a contractor or is a, on the payroll employee, they are going to be defined as an employee under the ADA. So it really gets down to the control that you have over that employee in the relationship you have with that employee. So that really is the factor. And as I said, there's some case law that looks at this issue as to who is an employer, and it really comes down to control and oversight of the position.
All right, thank you, Robin. Also, the next question is for you. What is the definition of a timely response?
Okay, good one. That really depends on what the accommodation request is and what is necessary in relationship to implementation of the request. So for example, if you were to look at saying right now, as we were just doing it here in our own office, needing to purchase a new computer with certain features on it right now, I can tell you trying to order anything from Dell or whatever right now will give you months of delay in being able to obtain that piece of equipment because they're not available, because Dell doesn't have the chips and things of that nature right now, and so their products aren't available. So your timeliness of being able to provide that specific accommodation may be impacted by supplier provisions types of issues. That doesn't mean you don't have any obligation. You would still need to look at do we have an alternative and as a temporary solution. It may not be the perfect or the exact accommodation, but I still have to look at that issue. What is most often comes up with this particular issue is employers need to look at their own policies and practices and make sure that they are not part of the problem. So for example, if you have a process of procurement that requires that you get 10 bids, or 5 bids on something, whatever, before you can make a purchase of equipment or something like that, that should definitely be re-examined in the context of reasonable accommodation, because that time that it takes to do that may be deemed unreasonable because of the process and administrative process that you are going through. So you may have to have a policy or practice that for reasons of reasonable accommodation, we only do 2 bids, or we do something differently to speed up that particular process. Also making sure you don't have an onerous approval process where it has to get reviewed and seen by 15 people before a purchase or something can be made or a decision can be made. It needs to be a timely process that allows you sufficient time to review the accommodation, but you may need to make modifications and adjustments to ensure that the individual with the disability is not being placed in a situation where they're not receiving an accommodation for a period of time, because what happens there then is if the employee can't produce and the employee then often becomes subject to discipline for non-production, but it's not their fault, it's because they haven't received the accommodation that they need. So it really is an individualized issue for a company to defend the time period that it takes for you to provide an accommodation, looking at all of those factors of procurement, decision-making, and policy.
Thank you, Robin. Do any of our other panelists have anything that they would like to add, or that you feel like you need to go back and touch on?
I see there's a question about disclosure. Did somebody take that one already? Does an applicant need to disclose a disability if they are receiving services from a DRS approved agency? For example, a post-secondary program. I can respond to that. First and foremost, the person never has to disclose a disability to anybody at any time unless they are requesting a reasonable accommodation. So just the fact that I'm receiving services from a particular program or service like rehab services or a medical professional or a counselor or something like that would not be a trigger at all for my need to disclose. I only need to disclose at the point of which I'm requesting a reasonable accommodation. That could be in the interview process if I'm requesting an accommodation to participate in the interview. It could be even at the application process if a accommodation is needed to participate in the application process, and then it could be in actually doing the job itself as well. So it's across the board, and understanding that an individual may not initially disclose because they're not familiar with the fact that they may need an accommodation for a particular task. They may never experience that environment or something, so they don't have a specific experience to rely on in relationship to requesting accommodation. So they may actually not disclose till a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks into a position or into a semester or whatever, because they did not anticipate or expect that they were going to have difficulty. They thought they could self-accommodate or something else, and then are finding experiences that they're having. So a person can request an accommodation at any time in the process of employment or in receiving services from an entity or post-secondary education. It's at that point of when they believe they need a reasonable accommodation that they have an obligation to disclose.
Thank you, Robin. Anybody else have anything to add? All right. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists. You all did a wonderful job and I appreciate it. October is Disability Awareness. Let's see. It's National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So this was a very timely webinar that we were able to present today. For those of you that have been asking, Tara is going to send out a notice when the recording is available on our website, and we'll also be sending out the materials for those that requested it. I also want to say thank you to Tara for her awesome support today. I'm not exactly techie, but she's a wonderful support to me. She's my right arm here in the office, and she's done a really good job with keeping up with everything today. So with that, I will sign off. I'll let you guys sign out. I know people are still putting things in the chat, and I'm going to leave my portal open for a little bit in case you want to see what was in there. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much. All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you.